welcome everybody. This is a Stanford Center on Longevity Toolkit Series webinar on understanding longevity with Steve Vernon. And thank you so much everybody for joining us. I am Sasha. I'm a researcher at the center and your host for today. And I want to just start by thanking some of the people and organizations that have made this series possible, including those listed here. And just before we get to the presentation, a quick housekeeping note. So throughout the presentation, we encourage you to post questions for our speaker. And at the end of the webinar, I will ask Steve some of the questions that you post. And we encourage you to stay through the question period because also at the end of the presentation, we'll have a few summary slides and action steps that you can take. So to ask a question during the presentation or during the question period, just type into the question section of the GoToWebinar sidebar window on your computer. And with that, I would like to introduce our speaker. So Steve Vernon is a research scholar at the Stanford Center on Longevity. He is also a national expert on retirement planning and saving behavior. And today he will be talking about how to make sense of the long lives that many of us are likely to live and how to plan for that uncertain future. So welcome, Steve.
Sasha, thanks so much for the introduction. And to all you out in the audience, thank you for joining us today. I hope you'll find it helpful and informative. The target audience for this webinar is really people in their 50s and their 60s who are approaching their retirement years, or people who are helping them, like advisors, financial institutions, friends, relatives. All these people are trying to get their arms around the long lives that we are living in today's society. I want to start by talking about the power of stories, because it's important to understand how stories can influence our behavior. Research from Stanford demonstrates actually that stories can have more of an impact on people's decision making than facts and figures. And actually what I like to do is combine stories with facts and figures to help people make important decisions. So what I'm going to do is share some stories that actually I've seen with some of my older friends and relatives. And so here's one, is that someone said, my uncle died at age 73. None of the men in my family have lived past age 75. I've heard this story from people who just have kind of a fatalistic attitude about long lives. But then I've also seen this story. My neighbor's 97-year-old aunt ran out of money and had to move in with them. She didn't think she would live that long. And then I've seen this story. This is from a friend of mine. My mother died of cancer at age 54. Enjoy it while you can. You just never know how long you will live. So these are just stories from my life's experience, and I'd ask you to reflect on the stories of your either friends or older relatives and how they might impact your thinking. Let's actually just go to a poll. What I'd like to ask is, of your relatives who have already passed away, what was the age of the relative who lived the longest? While we're waiting for the answers to come in, let me just say that a lot of people tend to focus on friends and relatives who might have passed away at younger ages and overlook the fact that they might have some relatives that actually lived a long time. And so that's why we want to draw your attention to this. So here are the results, and look at this. Almost half of the audience, 46%, had at least one older friend and relative pass away at age over 90. And then the rest are spread out almost evenly between early 80s and late 80s. And actually, I think this is representative of the general population, is that with a lot of us, we have both some friends and relatives who passed away at younger ages and friends and relatives who have passed away at older ages. And that just, to me, represents the range of possible human experience that we have in society today. Let me start by saying that the media gives you the wrong impression about life expectancies. When you hear about average life expectancy in the media, most of the time it refers to the average length of life for everybody who was born. So you might hear that the average American lives to their late 70s or early 80s. Here's just one example that you might have seen recently in the popular press showing the average life expectancy from birth for the general US population. And you see things like men might live on average to age 76, women might live to age 81. But these are the wrong numbers to focus on when you're planning for your retirement, because these calculations factor in everybody who dies in childhood and early adulthood. If you live to your 50s or 60s, you're in a more exclusive group since you've already survived that long. Really, people who are planning their retirement should focus on the remaining life expectancy, given that they've already lived to their 50s or 60s. So this chart shows that a 60-year-old female has about a 50-50 chance of living to age 88 compared to age 81 from the previous chart. And similarly, a 60-year-old man has a 50-50 chance of living to age 85 compared to age 76 from that previous chart. Both of these charts apply to the population at large, but research is showing that there can be significant differences due to your educational achievement, your level of wealth or income, and the geographic region that you live in. And so we're going to cover these differences later on in this presentation. An important point is to say that really life is uncertain, and this points to the range of possible experiences that you might see with either yourself or your friends and relatives. And so here's a chart that says a 60-year-old woman who's in average health has about a 1 in 2 chance of living to age 88. But she also has about a 1 in 4 chance of either living to age 81 or age 95. So think about this as the odds of the chance you might draw a heart out of a deck of cards. That's the chance that you might live to age 95. But also there's a 1 in 4 chance you won't make it past age 81, which might be the same as the odds of drawing a club out of that same deck of cards. So this 1 in 4 odds have a spread of about 14 years. This uncertainty about how long you could live needs to be a significant consideration when planning how long your money needs to last. Some people, if they don't focus on the implications of a long life, they might justify short-sighted decisions like retiring early, starting Social Security as soon as possible, or spending their savings down rapidly. Enjoy it while you can, because you just never know, could easily be their mantra. And these people might dismiss strategies that would protect them if they were to live a long time. And those strategies would include delaying Social Security benefits, buying an annuity, or adopting a cautious, thoughtful strategy for withdrawing from savings. If they don't take a long-term point of view, they might think to themselves, I'd be mad if I died after delaying my Social Security benefits, or if I passed away before spending all my money. Actually, in that situation, people wouldn't be mad, they'd just be dead. And science really can't tell us what dead people would be thinking. But most people can imagine being alive, old, and poor, just like the aunt mentioned previously. So I think it makes sense to plan for all possibilities. Here's that same chart for a 60-year-old man who's in average health and doesn't smoke. He has about a 1 in 4 chance he'll make it to age 92, living at least another 32 years. But there's also a 1 in 4 chance he won't make it past age 77, living 17 years, and a 1 in 4 chance of living to age 92. So the spread in these 1 in 4 odds have a spread of 15 years. Some people dwell on the possibility of living a short lifespan, and so they might make short-sighted decisions about spending their money. And instead, I suggest they use that as motivation to make important life choices that don't involve short-sighted decisions about money. For example, they can take care of unfinished business in their lives, such as making up with friends or family members they may be estranged from, or visit long-lost relatives. They can take up that hobby or cause they've always wanted to pursue, or find ways to travel without draining their savings. It also turns out that your health and lifestyle choices will also significantly influence how long you could live. If our 60-year-old man who's in excellent health and doesn't smoke, he has a 50-50 chance of living another 27 years to age 87. But a similar man in poor health who smokes has a 50-50 chance of living another 15 years to age 75. So that's a 12-year difference that your lifestyle choices can influence. Here's the same chart for a woman If she's in excellent health and doesn't smoke, she has a 50-50 chance of living another 30 years to age 90. But if she's in poor health and smokes, she has a 50-50 chance of living no more than 19 years to age 79, for 11-year difference. Back to thinking about your older friends and relatives, if you had friends or relatives who died young, find out about their lifestyles, because it can be scary to see older friends and relatives who passed away early, but maybe they had lifestyle choices that are different from yours. Did they smoke? Were they overweight? Did they get exercise? Did they have good nutrition? It turns out you might be living a healthier lifestyle, and that might indicate that you could live longer than your older friends and relatives. Now, in planning, we've talked about different odds of living to different ages, and some people might plan to an average life expectancy. So my money needs to last just to my average life expectancy, but that only gives you a 50-50 chance of not outliving your money. And so you might really want to plan for living to longer ages, and maybe the odds are only 1 out of 4 you might live to those longer ages, but if you're making that 1 out of 4 odds, you don't want to run out of money. And so this gets into considerations about how quickly you spend down your savings. And I think a lot of people who are responsible and really take it seriously would like to cover the possibility that they might live a long time. If you're married, one of you might live a long time. So if you're a 60-year-old married couple in average health, there's about a 1 in 2 chance that one of the partners will live to age 92, a 1 in 4 chance that one might make it to age 97, and a 1 in 10 chance that one partner might live to age 101. And so really this makes, it means that you want to make careful decisions for both partners about when you might start Social Security, if you have a pension plan, whether or not to select a joint survivor pension, how quickly you draw down savings balances, working with financial advisors. You want to involve both spouses in all of these decisions. So you've all seen charts that show the dramatic increase in life expectancies during the 20th century, but I want to share a unique statistical perspective from Dr. John Shoven. He's a prominent economist here at Stanford. And just from a statistical perspective, what does it mean to be old? And so Dr. Shoven expresses it in what are your odds of dying in a given year? And he says if your chance of dying in a year is 1%, 1 out of 100 or less, you could be considered either young or middle-aged. And this chart shows that that threshold, do you have a 1% or less odds of dying in a given year? That threshold increased from about age 44 in the 1920s, whereas now it's age 60. And so what that's saying is that from a statistical perspective, middle age might have increased from age 44 to age 60. Dr. Shoven also contends if your chance of dying in a year is 2% or more, 2 out of 100, you might consider yourself old. That threshold age has increased from about age 55 in the 1920s to age 70 today. And finally, if your chance of dying in a year is 4% or more, you might consider yourself very old. And this threshold age increased from about age 65 in the 1920s to age 76 today. And if you note by these definitions, old in the 1920s, 55, is now middle-aged. And very old in the 1920s, age 65, is just merely old today. Here's the same chart for women. And by this measure, old is now about age 73, up from the late 50s. And very old is now about age 80, up from age 67. So let's take a look at longevity in the news. And several recent studies are identifying a growing life expectancy inequality gap, inequality by income, wealth, or educational attainment. And it turns out that there are significant geographic differences in life expectancies for the lowest income quartiles, particularly associated with health behaviors such as smoking, lack of exercise, and obesity. At the Stanford Center on Longevity, we're motivated to understand the reasons for these differences and how we can increase lifespans for all of the population. And so I'm asking you to keep in mind that the longevity statistics we're presenting in this presentation are for the population at large. you may want to make adjustments for your circumstances, or if you're planning for your customers or older friends and relatives. Take into consideration what their educational attainment is and what their wealth or income level is. If either you or your relatives or employees or customers, if they have a steady job at an established employer with good retirement and health benefits, there's a good chance that they're in the top half or even the top fourth of Americans in life expectancies. And so that really should be taken into account in their planning. Just by way of background, I'm going to give you some background to understand some charts that I'm going to show you in subsequent slides, because there's some technical differences in life expectancy calculations. So one type of life expectancy calculation are called period life expectancies, and this is just based on current mortality rates, and it's a good snapshot of the existing longevity in the population, assuming that longevity doesn't get better or worse. On the other hand, you might hear about generational or cohort or projected life expectancies, and those are actually projecting future changes in mortality rates. Most of the time we project that they'll decline and the longevity will get better, but occasionally we see situations where mortality is actually getting worse in the future. The second type of life expectancy calculations may be more appropriate for planning for specific people or groups. So with that background, I want to share some interesting research that we've seen and that's been in the press lately. Here's a study from 2015 from the National Academy of Sciences that shows for the bottom quintile, in other words, the bottom 20% of female earners, remaining life expectancy from age 50 reduced by 4 years for women born in 1960 compared to women born in 1930. On the other hand, for the top quintile earners, the top 20%, remaining life expectancy increased by 5.5 years when comparing women born in 1960 versus 1930. For men, the projected life expectancy at age 50 reduced by 1/2 a year when you're comparing men born in 1960 compared to men born in 1930. Whereas the top quintile, again, the top 20%, remaining life expectancy increased by 7.1 years when comparing men born in 1930 versus 1960. According to this study, smoking and obesity accounted for a large share of these disparities between the top quintile and the bottom quintile of earners. Here's a different study that shows the expectant age at death for current 40-year-olds by income percentiles. And this is actually, just so we understand this line, the horizontal axis is the income percentile, 1% by 1%, and the vertical axis is the expected age at death. And what this is showing is that for every 1% increase in your income, you're actually getting an increase in your life expectancy. And this shows that really there's actually appears to be no upper bound on the correlation between income and life expectancies. This has been surprising to us because for the longest time we felt that once you reached kind of a middle income level, there really wasn't extra increases in life expectancies. But what this is showing is that the impact of wealth is stronger than we had imagined before. And it seems to be impacting all the way up through the wealth spectrum. From that same study, here's an interesting chart that actually analyzes life expectancies by geographic region. This time we're looking at income of vintile. That's every 5th percentage of income. And if you look at this, the number on the horizontal line, the number 10 and beyond, that's actually after the 50th percentile. And what each line represents are life expectancies by 4 different geographic regions: New York City, San Francisco, Dallas, and Detroit. And we don't need to memorize this chart other than to say that once you get past the 50th percentile in wealth, pretty much there aren't significant differences in life expectancies by income. But what we do see are dramatic differences in life expectancies at the lower income levels. And what this is showing, if you're low income, you'd be better off living in New York City or San Francisco compared to Dallas or Detroit. This study, I think, attributes these differences in life expectancies to disparities in smoking, obesity, exercise levels, but also it's attributing it to supportive community and local government services that are addressing low-income people. Finally, here's another study that was published in Lancet earlier this year, and this compared life expectancy at birth among 35 countries. And this chart shows that the US ranks 25th out of these 35 countries. This is for females. This is the same chart for males. The US is ranking 23rd out of 35 countries. The poor rankings for the US are usually attributed to poor health and mortality among lower income and lower educational status areas, as we've just talked about. I attended a conference earlier this year that attributed the poor showing for the US to 3 reasons. One is that we have more income disparity than other nations. We don't have universal health care. And then other nations have more generous retirement benefits. So all of this is pointing to other nations might have more supportive programs that help out low income and low educational status citizens. Here's the same chart showing remaining life expectancy at age 65 from the same study. And actually, this is for women, and it shows that our ranking moved up a little bit. We're now 21st out of 35. And for men, we've actually moved up to 7th out of 35. And so this is showing that, we're ranking 9th, not 7th. At the Stanford Center on Longevity, a major effort of ours is the Sightlines Project, where we've identified action steps that research supports can increase the odds of living long and living well. And our goal is to help Americans of all walks in life improve their health and longevity. These steps fall into 3 areas: healthy living, financial security, and social engagement. Dr. Tamara Sims summarized these steps in our last webinar. And if you missed it, the recording will be available on our website. Our website also has briefs that summarize these action steps. And so if you're interested in living a long time and what actions you can take to help improve the odds, then that's an excellent place to start. I'd like to have a second poll. How long would you like to live if you could be healthy in body and mind and financially secure for most of your years? So let's see what the audience says. While the answers come in, let me say that last year, the Stanford Center on Longevity and Heart Research Associates surveyed people that asked these kinds of questions. And it showed that 3/4 of people, 77%, would actually want to live to 100, and more than 1/3 believe that they might live past 90. The data, though, shows that only about 1/3 of people say they're happy with their current body weight and their financial situation. And of Americans over age 65 who want to retire by the time they reach age 65, of Americans under age 65 who say they want to retire by the time they reach 65, slightly more than 1/3, 40%, say that they won't have the financial means to live to 100. So what we're doing is we're seeing a serious disconnect between what people are actually doing versus how they feel about their odds of living a long time. So let's see what the poll results are here. And yes, what this is showing similar results is that 3/4 of you said you would like to live to age 90 if you could be, or longer, if you could have healthy mind and body and be financially secure. And almost the rest of you are saying age 85 to 89. So we're just following up by saying that if you're interested in living long and living well, you might want to look at some of the action steps that we've prepared, and also attend future webinars, because over the next several months, we're going to be digging down on different action steps, specific action steps that people can take in the areas of financial security, health, and social engagement. In a few minutes, I'm going to wrap up with some important action steps and take-home points. But first, I'd like to take a few questions. But please stick around because we have some important action steps and take-home points that we'll wrap up with. So Sasha, she's going to field some questions that we might have received.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, and everyone. I'm Sasha. And so, Steve, we have a few questions from our audience. One that came in is about the differing effects of wealth or education on driving life expectancy. So is it just wealth, or is it also education that drives life expectancy differences?
That's an excellent question, and that's what social scientists are trying to tease out, is that what is the impact of health on your health and longevity of either income or wealth or educational status. And actually, we're very interested in the direction of causation. So for example, if you have a higher educational status, does that give you kind of the discipline and information to take action steps to increase your longevity? Or does the extra wealth and income help buy you services and buy you a social network that helps? And we actually think that the causation goes in both directions, but it's really hard to tease out. But this is actually very interesting to scientists here at Stanford at the Center on Longevity. We're very interested in the impacts. We happen to believe that there are action steps that people can take to improve their health and longevity. And if you have more education, you're more likely to be aware of these action steps. Your friends and relatives might be more aware of these action steps as well, and so you're influenced by the people around you. If you're in low income status, sometimes you're so stressed by your financial world that you just don't have leftover willpower or discipline to take these action steps. So what we're seeing is that a number of these differences in life expectancies are attributed back to differences in nutritional status and obesity and smoking. So I happen to think, this is my own opinion, that the stresses of living on the edge financially take their toll, either by not eating properly or not able to kick smoking if you're smoking. I happen to be an optimist, and I don't believe that you're doomed if you're in a low income status. I think if you take these action steps to increase, or I'm sorry, stop smoking, eat right, build your social network, take steps to improve your health, I happen to be optimistic to think that that will help improve your longevity. And so really, that's what we like to focus on, are what are the action steps that people of all walks of life and all income levels can take to improve their situation. But thanks for that question. That's really an important question for all of us here at the Center on Longevity.
And Steve, I have another question from the audience that's about some of the policy landscape around it. So here's the question. I've heard more and more people are living past age 100 or over for over 10 years now. It doesn't seem like life expectancies are reflecting this longevity. So how are insurers adjusting their risk for people living longer?
Well, that's a very good question too, and insurers are particularly interested in life expectancy calculations because they're on the hook for paying off either annuities or life insurance. And so they're very focused on this challenge. And actually, I think it's safe to say that most insurers are taking into consideration differences in life expectancies, and they are very well aware that the purchasers of their products and services are more likely to be either higher educated or higher income. And so when I was showing you life expectancy differences, the insurers are very well aware of this, and they're taking this into account. Now, having said that, one of the challenges in the insurance business is that we don't have decades of experience of the current population. And so a lot of insurers are making what I'll call highly educated guesses at how life expectancy will be continuing to increase. And this becomes an issue also for other entities other than insurance companies. Social Security. You may have heard that Social Security has funding problems. Well, one of the funding problems is people are living longer. And so the actuaries at Social Security are very well aware of issues of longevity, although they're now projecting longevity for all members of the population, not just buyers of insurance companies. So I'm just talking here. There are a lot of entities out here who are very interested in tracking these emerging differences in life expectancies, and also overall, though, the increases in life expectancies that we're seeing.
So Steve, we have time for one more question, which is, so if it's about transitioning out of the workforce. So if a person is in a high pressure but also high salary job, is there any research on when it's a good time to move to less responsibility and work, but also potentially lower salary?
Well, thanks. That's a great question. And actually, let me just share a personal story in answer to that question, is that I think that if you really understand the issues with longevity, you end up concluding, maybe I should work longer than I thought. So in my case, I had a high-stress job. I retired from that in my mid-50s, but I didn't retire to leave the workforce. I just took a lower-stress, more interesting job. And I've been doing that for 10 years now. And so I think a life plan for a lot of people to think about when they're in their late 50s and early 60s is consider, instead of retiring from the full-time workforce to the full-time retirement, I ask people to think about looking at a job that might be less stressful, give you more time to pursue your interests, and yet still make enough money to allow your financial resources to grow. It's real apparent that the best strategy for claiming Social Security is to wait until age 70. And actually, if you're in a 401k plan or drawing down your savings, taking those down in your late 60s or 70s is a good strategy for people who think they might live into their late 80s or 90s. But when I say this strategy to a lot of people in their 50s and 60s, they groan and say, I can't think of working at my current job at the same pace. So I'm a big fan of looking for ways to change your life with respect to the amount of time you spend working and the amount of, the money you make. And actually, I've adopted that strategy for myself. So thanks, Sasha. I think we'll continue. We'll just wrap up with action steps and take-home points. The Stanford Center on Longevity has prepared briefs that summarize action plans for people of all ages to increase the odds that they will live long and live well, and they're posted on our website. I think knowing how long you live or might live is one step to help you develop strategies for your retirement income. And as I was mentioning earlier, life expectancies can help you decide when it makes sense for you to start your Social Security benefits and other retirement income strategies. The website shown here at the bottom of this page is the Longevity Illustrator prepared by the Society of Actuaries that calculated the estimates shown in this segment. But just moving beyond finances, what will retirees do for the 20 or 30 or even 40 years that they might have after they quit working full-time? I think that when people focus on this challenge, they might realize that taking art classes and traveling and playing golf won't occupy even half of their time in retirement. Many people focus too much on the vacation aspects of retirement, but these activities really will only take a small portion of their day-to-day existence. And so I would say that in addition to thinking about your leisure activities, you might want to think about where you're going to live and what you'll do on a daily basis and who you might want to see regularly. I think that many people who realistically face up to the financial and lifestyle implications of living these longer lives might end up rejecting the cultural expectation of retirement as a period of leisure and winding down. And they might come to realize that retirement is a chance to do something new with their lives. They might even continue working for pay in some manner in order to have some extra spending money and to help make ends meet during their later years, to make social connections, and to do work that they might enjoy. So I think retirement offers a new opportunity for people to make conscious choices about where they'll live, where they'll work, and where they'll play, and what they'll spend their money on. And they'll want to adopt lifestyle and financial strategies that will support this new vision for their retirement years. And all of these topics we'll be covering in the months to come with briefs at the Center on Longevity Issues and webinars that we're putting on each month like this one. Here's another action step I'd encourage you is to look around to your older friends and relatives for the positive steps that they're taking and ask them to share their stories. Just to wrap up the take-home points, let's just summarize that the media gives many people the wrong idea about how long they might live. Many people might live a long time, into their 80s, 90s, or even the age 100. But even still, there's a lot of uncertainty about how long a single person might actually live. And that is just part of the human experience that we need to understand and appreciate and then plan for. And I think your financial and lifestyle plan should address this uncertainty about how long you might live. Genes aren't your destiny. Lifestyle factors can have an important impact too. And finally, we do want to pay attention to all the stories that can influence people's choices. That's an important finding that we're seeing at the Center on Longevity is the importance of behavioral issues. In addition to the statistics and the strategies, we need to integrate behavioral issues and psychological decision-making in our planning. And just I think it's important to remember that we've reviewed some statistics that give you insights into planning your life, but life expectancy calculations aren't your destiny. Action steps that you take can significantly improve the odds of living a long, healthy life. And I'd like to wrap up with this story that I've heard from an older relative. She said, you know, if I knew I'd live this long, I would have planned better. So I'd encourage you to live for today and live for tomorrow, because it's entirely possible that many people might live a very long time. And then they'll have their own stories to tell that will positively influence their children and grandchildren. So thanks so much for attending today. And Sasha, I'm turning it back to you.
Thank you, Steve, so much for that presentation. And to our attendees, I want to let you know about some of our upcoming webinars. So we have one in June on financial fraud and one in July on the importance of social connectedness. And I think those will both be very fascinating conversations. I also want to note that for our previous webinars, including the one that Steve mentioned by Dr. Tamara Sims on the Sightlines Project, we will have posted the recordings of those on our website. So if you did miss those webinars, you can watch the recordings. In order to access those recordings and also the registration links for this upcoming webinars, I recommend getting on our toolkit email list. So in the next day or two, you'll get an email with a link to join that if you're interested in staying up to date about upcoming toolkit series projects. And so with that, thank you everybody for coming. And this is the end of the webinar.